The telemetry alarm in room 304 went off at 9:14 on a Tuesday morning, and I knew before I reached the doorway that it wasn't his heart, it was his eyes. Stroke patients get a certain look when the fog lifts. I've seen it 100 times in my career. This wasn't fog lifting. This was a man reading the name badge clipped to my scrubs, then my face, then the badge again, while the number on his monitor climbed from 88 to 141. His right side hadn't moved in 9 days. His left hand found the bed rail and gripped it so hard the IV line swayed. Coup, he said. The stroke had stolen most of his words. He fought for this one. Coup. Coup l'air. I did what nurses do. I silenced the alarm, kept my voice level, and checked his oxygen. My name is Nurse Bennett, I said. I'm the charge nurse on this unit. Let's get that blood pressure down. But he was right the first time. My name is Claire. 10 years ago, it was Claire Hale. And the last time this man heard my voice, I was 14 years old, standing on a staircase, begging him not to leave my mother to die. To explain how my father ended up paralyzed in room 304 of my unit, with my signature at the bottom of his care plan, I have to take you back a decade, to the night he decided our family was a job he could quit. I want a partner, not a patient. I am not a nurse. My father screamed those words up the staircase of our house on Meridian Court, while my mother shook under 3 blankets in the master bedroom, bald from her second round of chemo. The humidifier hissed beside her bed. Her pale blue scarf sat folded on the nightstand where she'd left it, because she'd been too exhausted that day to care who saw her scalp. I was 14. My little brother Jason was 8, still in his dinosaur pajamas at 7 in the evening because nobody had the energy to enforce rules anymore. We sat frozen on the stairs, 6 steps apart, and listened to the sound that ended our family. His suitcase closing. 2 brass clasps, click, click. Mom had been diagnosed 5 months earlier. She found the lump in October, doing a self-exam in the shower because a pamphlet at her dentist's office told her to. Stage 3, invasive ductal carcinoma. The surgeon took her left breast in November. Chemo started the second week of January, and by February she was the thinnest I had ever seen a living person. And my father, a man who once drove 40 minutes to return a steak because it was cooked medium instead of medium rare, discovered that sickness was a defect he could not tolerate in the merchandise. Looking back, the red flags had been stacking up for months, and I'd filed every one of them under stress. He started going to the gym at 5 in the morning. New cologne, something sharp and expensive that didn't smell like my father. Client dinners that ran past midnight. He began sleeping in his home office, and when he did come into their bedroom, he stood in the doorway with his hands in his pockets like a man observing visiting hours. Once, in March, I watched him watch her sleep. I thought it was love. It was inventory. That night, the night of the suitcase, I ran up and grabbed his sleeve on the landing. Please don't go. He didn't even look at me. He just adjusted his silver Rolex, the Datejust he'd bought himself the year he made senior consultant, the one he wiped down with a cloth every Sunday, like he was running late for a meeting. Jason wrapped himself around Dad's leg, sobbing so hard he hiccuped. Daddy, Mom's sick. Dad peeled him off finger by finger, the way you'd remove some stranger's kid clinging to you in a grocery store. I can't do this, he muttered. Not, I'm sorry. Not, I'll explain when you're older. Just an executive summary. I can't do this. An hour later, the front door clicked shut behind him. Through the window, I watched the taillights of his Audi A6 slide down Meridian Court and turn left toward the freeway, and that was it. 15 years of marriage, 2 kids, 1 diagnosis. Turn left at the stop sign. He never even said goodbye to her. Mom called us upstairs that night. She had put the pale blue scarf on. She was sitting up against the headboard with her hands folded, and I remember thinking that she looked like someone bracing for a wave she'd already seen coming. Where's your father? She asked. I forced the words out. He left. She closed her eyes. She didn't cry. She just nodded once and said, all right, 1 word. I have spent 10 years learning how much a person can carry inside 1 word. 1 month later, we learned he'd moved into a luxury condo across town. Carmel Ridge, the kind of building with a rooftop pool and a lobby that smells like eucalyptus. He wasn't alone. Her name was Brittany. She was 24. She was his personal trainer, which explained the 5 a.m. gym sessions, the cologne, and the sudden interest in a body he'd ignored for a decade. A friend of my mom's showed her the Instagram photos before thinking better of it. Brittany, in a white bikini on the rooftop. My father behind her, tan, sunglasses on his head, holding a drink with fruit in it, while his wife threw up anti-nausea medication into a plastic bucket I held for her. 2 months after he left, the mortgage payment stopped. Mom tried to hide the bank letters, but I saw them stacked on the kitchen counter behind the fruit bowl. Red stamps. Final notice. Notice of default. Words I had to look up on the school library computer because I was 14, and I thought maybe there was a form I could fill out to fix it. Her lawyer got a child support order, and for a while, money appeared through a wage garnishment. Then my father formed an LLC, made his income disappear into it like a magician's dove, and the checks shrank to almost nothing. Perfectly legal, I'm told. Then, on a Tuesday in August, a man in a gray suit knocked on our door with a folder and an apologetic voice, and we lost the house. While she was still in radiation, she had burns on her chest from the treatment field, and she stood in the doorway of the home where both her children were born and signed where the man pointed. We moved into a 2-bedroom apartment above a laundromat called the Wash and Go. The washing machines rattled through the floor all night, a sound like the building grinding its teeth. Jason cried while we loaded boxes into a borrowed pickup truck and asked the question that still lives in my chest. Are we ever coming back? Mom smiled at him so he wouldn't be scared. No, sweetheart. She never cried where we could see her. I know now, because because I've been an adult in hard places, that this means she cried where we couldn't, in the shower, in the car, in the parking lot, in the 40 seconds between turning off her bedside lamp and Jason patting in to ask for water. So I made a decision in that rattling little apartment, sitting on a mattress on the floor because the bed frame hadn't survived the move. If somebody in this family was going to stay when things got hard, it would be me. I was going to be the person who stayed. Here is what staying looked like. For the people in the back who think it's a greeting card word, staying is holding the bucket at 2 a.m. when the chemo makes her sick, and rubbing her back in slow circles, and not letting your face show anything, because she is watching your face to see how scared she should be. Staying is helping your mother walk the 11 steps to the bathroom with her arm over your shoulders, matching your pace to hers, pretending you're not counting the steps. Staying is bathing her when she is too weak to stand, and being gentle with the port in her chest, and talking about your biology homework the whole time so the moment has somewhere else to look. Staying is cooking macaroni for your little brother 4 nights a week, with the hot dogs cut into coins because that's how he likes them, and checking his math homework and signing mom's name on his permission slips with her blessing because her hands shake too much for the pen. Staying is bagging groceries at the Albertsons on 5th after school for $9.25 an hour and putting half of it in the jar on the fridge marked quarters and emergencies. Staying is studying biology flashcards in the waiting room of the St. Mary's Infusion Center every other Friday because you refuse to let your grades be one more thing the cancer takes. One afternoon that spring, I watched a nurse named Rosa tuck a warmed blanket around my mother's shoulders in the infusion chair. She did it calmly, without ceremony, the way you'd do something you had done 10,000 times and still meant. Steady hands, steady voice. Like sickness didn't scare her at all. Like sickness was just a thing that happened in rooms she worked in, and she was not impressed by it. I remember thinking, that's a kind of power I've never seen before. On the bus home, I whispered, "Mom, I think I want to be a nurse." She squeezed my hand with the little strength she had left. "You'd be a good one." Mom fought through the second round and the third, through radiation burns and neuropathy and the medical bills that arrived like weather, through a landlord who raised the rent anyway, and a school counselor who gently asked me if there were any adults at home, as if I hadn't become one at 14. And Mom won. The doctor said the word remission 3 weeks after my 19th birthday, and it felt like a window finally opening in a dark room. I stood in the hallway of the oncology clinic and cried for the first time in 5 years. Great heaving, embarrassing sobs, while my mother, the actual patient, patted my back and told the oncologist, "She's usually the calm one." The year I turned 18, I paid $435 in filing fees, stood in front of a judge, and legally changed my last name to Bennett, my mother's maiden name. The judge asked if I understood the change was permanent. "That's the point," I said. Jason did the same the week after his own 18th birthday. As far as we were concerned, Hale was a name that had gotten in a car and turned left. I finished my prerequisites at night at the community college while working days. I got into the nursing program on my second try. I passed the NCLEX on my first. Jason graduated high school with a 3.8 and a scholarship. Life moved forward the way it does. Not in a montage, but in payments, semesters, small Tuesdays. And Dad? He vanished into his upgrade. We heard he married Brittany at a vineyard. Someone showed us the Facebook album before thinking better of it. He started a consulting business, Hale Strategic Consulting, LLC. His LinkedIn described him as a growth architect. He never called, never sent a graduation card, never sent $1 beyond what the garnishment squeezed out before his income went invisible. Eventually, we stopped expecting anything. Grief with no funeral. You'd be amazed how completely a living man can die to you. 10 years after he walked out, I became head nurse of B-Wing at Riverview Terrace Rehabilitation and Long-Term Care. 88 beds, the youngest charge nurse the facility had ever promoted. My director joked that I interviewed like someone with 20 years of experience. I didn't tell her the truth, which is that I'd been training since I was 14. Riverview takes the patients nobody else wants. Massive strokes, traumatic brain injuries, paralysis, people whose families disappear after the second week, once they understand what long-term means. People who need patience more than medicine. I love it. It is the only place I've ever worked where staying is the entire job description. 2 weeks ago, on a gray Thursday afternoon, our social worker dropped a thick admission file on my desk and sighed the sigh she saves for the bad ones. Maria Vasquez, LCSW. 12 years of geriatric social work, cardigan in every season, coffee in a mug that says I'm only here for the discharge planning. She has seen everything twice. New admission from St. Vincent's ER, she said. Massive stroke. How bad? I asked. Still typing. Bad. Left MCA. Right side's paralyzed. He can barely speak. He'll need full-time care, probably for the rest of his life. Family support? She let out a dry laugh, the kind with no humor in it at all. That's the wild part. His wife dropped him at the ER entrance and drove off. Didn't even park the car. My pen stopped moving. She filed for divorce that same morning, Maria went on, flipping a page. Told the intake nurse she's too young to waste her life being somebody's caretaker. Something ice cold slid down my spine and settled at the base of it. I knew those words. Not the sentiment. The words. I had heard their original recording screamed up a staircase 10 years ago, in a house on Meridian Court, over the hiss of a humidifier. Is there any other family listed? I asked. My voice sounded normal. I have a very good normal voice. experience. I built it at 14. Barely any. That's why he's ours now. She slid the folder across the desk. He's already settled in room 304. I opened the file, and the whole room went silent around me. Not quiet, silent, the way a room goes when your own pulse gets loud enough to replace the HVAC, the phones, the med cart rattling past the door. The name on the chart was Richard Hale, born March 12, 1962. My father, the man who screamed, "I am not a nurse," at my dying mother, was now lying paralyzed in room 304, and the nurse in charge of the unit responsible for keeping him alive was me. I read the name 6 times. I checked the date of birth against the one I still knew by heart. I looked at the ER face sheet photo. Grayer, heavier, slack on the right side, but the jaw was his. The jaw was absolutely his. "Claire," Maria was watching me. "You okay?" "I need 10 minutes," I said. I took 8. Then I did the thing that 10 years of nursing has drilled into my bones, the thing that separates professionals from people in movies. I documented everything, and I told the truth to the person above me. Donna Okafor, RN, has been our director of nursing for 11 of her 22 years in the field. She has survived every state audit and every flu season. She keeps a bowl of peppermints on her desk for families and a bottle of ibuprofen in the drawer for staff. I closed her office door and set it flat, like a report. The new admission in 304 is my biological father. I haven't seen or spoken to him in 10 years. He doesn't know I work here. He doesn't know my name is Bennett. To her lasting credit, Dana didn't gasp and didn't reach for gossip. She reached into her filing cabinet and pulled out a conflict of interest disclosure form, and we filled it out together like the boring, beautiful piece of paperwork it was. The plan was simple and correct. I would not be his assigned nurse. His direct care went to Priya Nair, RN, 11 years experience, half of it in hospice, the gentlest clinician I have ever watched work. Medication passes, assessments, ADLs, Priya, and the aides. I would continue running the unit, because that's my job, but with a documented firewall between me and his bedside whenever staffing allowed. "I can move him to A-Wing," Dana said. "Say the word. Nobody would question a bed shuffle." "No," I said. "We're fine." I told myself it was about census and staffing ratios. B-Wing had the open stroke bed. A wing was full of respiratory patients. That was the first lie I charted to myself, and I knew it even as I filed it. The truth is that some part of me, a part I wasn't proud of and didn't inspect too closely, needed him where I could see him. I read his chart that night the way other people read a letter from a ghost. Left middle cerebral artery infarct, right-sided hemiparesis, expressive aphasia. He could understand nearly everything and produce almost nothing. Language reduced to rubble he had to dig single words out of. Dysphagia, nectar-thick liquids only, aspiration precautions, a swallow study pending, and a feeding tube, likely in the near term, per the consult note from Dr. Alan Reyes, the neurologist who covers our facility. 18 years in stroke care, and a documentation style so dry you could strike a match on it. His assessment ended with a sentence I read 3 times. Prognosis for return to independent living. Poor. The belongings inventory was 1 line long. Personal effects. 1. Men's wristwatch, silver, scratched band. The Rolex. 10 years older, band scratched, still ticking. The entire estate of a growth architect, itemized in a plastic bin. The first time I stood in his doorway, 2 days after admission, he was asleep with the head of the bed at 30 degrees, a positioning wedge keeping the pressure off his right hip. The tan was gone. The gym arms were gone. His right hand lay curled on his chest like a question mark. The man who had filled a staircase with his voice now took up barely half a hospital bed. I stood there for a full minute, waiting to feel the thing you're supposed to feel. Rage or triumph or grief. What I felt instead was my training. Reposition Q2H. Watch that right heel. The head of bed should come up a little higher before the next feeding. He woke once while I stood there and looked straight through me, the way he'd always looked through staff anywhere. Waiters, receptionists, nurses, furniture that talks. Some habits survive a stroke. He didn't know me. Why would he? The last time he saw me, I was 14, with braces and his last name. The woman in the doorway was 24, in navy scrubs, with her mother's maiden name printed on her badge, C. Bennett, RN. For 5 days, I was furniture. I confess that it was a mercy. He was not an easy patient. This surprised no one who had read his social history. He refused breakfast trays by turning his face to the window, which is the only refusal a man with one working side has left. He pressed his call light and then, when an aide arrived, said nothing, just stared, as if ringing for a life that had stopped answering. One of our aides, 19 years old and kind in a way the world hasn't worn out of her yet, asked me, was he somebody important? He used to think so, I said, and went back to my charting. Priya was endlessly patient with him. She narrated everything she did in her low, unhurried voice. "I'm going to turn you now, Mr. Hale. This is the cold part. I'm sorry." And I would hear it from the hall and feel something twist in my chest that I refused to name on shift. Then came Tuesday, day 9, 9:14 a.m. Priya was down the hall at a swallow study with another resident, so I covered the morning medication pass, because that is what charge nurses do, and because the firewall was always whenever staffing allowed, and that morning it didn't allow. I scanned his wristband. I said the script I have said 10,000 times. "Good morning. My name is Nurse Bennett. I'm the charge nurse on this unit, and I have your morning medications." He looked at the badge, then my face, then the badge, and the monitor started to climb, and his left hand found the rail, and he dragged a single word up out of the rubble. Cooler. You already know what I did, because you were there at the beginning. I silenced the alarm. I kept my voice level. I told him my name was Nurse Bennett, and took his blood pressure with steady hands, because Rosa taught me 12 years ago what steady hands are for. What I didn't put in any chart is what happened after. I finished the pass, walked to the med room, closed the door, and stood with both hands flat on the counter while they shook like I'd carried something heavy up 10 flights. 90 seconds. I watched the clock. Then I washed my face at the sink, and I went and finished my rounds. Because the difference between him and me, the entire difference, the one I have built a life on, is that I stay in the building. After that morning, he watched me every time I passed his door. I felt it the way you feel weather. Sometimes his mouth would work at something, his lips shaping a word he couldn't excavate, and I would keep walking, because whatever it was, he was 10 years too late to say it, and I had 31 other residents. On day 13, Brittany came. I smelled her before I saw her, vanilla and money, and then there she was at the nurse's station in white jeans and a blazer, trailed by a bored-looking mobile notary with a stamp bag. She set a leather folder on my counter like she was closing a deal. I need my husband to sign a few things, she said. It'll take 5 minutes. I opened the folder because that is my job. A quitclaim deed transferring his interest in the Carmel Ridge condo to her alone. A DMV title transfer for a Range Rover. A signature authorization for an account at a bank I won't name. He can't sign these today, I said. Her smile stayed on but stopped working. Excuse me? He's my husband. He has a capacity evaluation pending with Dr. Reyes, I said. Until it's complete, our policy and his rights as a resident mean no legal documents get executed at bedside. You're welcome to leave your attorney's information. Maria Vasquez materialized beside me the way social workers do, holding, of all things, the printed contact card for the long-term care ombudsman. She has a sixth sense for this exact species of visit. And then Brittany's mask didn't slip so much as come off entirely, in the middle of my hallway, 8 feet from his open door. He can't even talk, she said. What does he need a condo for? He's basically furniture. The hallway went very quiet. An aide froze mid-step with a linen bag, and from room 304, clearly I heard the bed rail rattle once, a left hand gripping. Brittany gathered her folder. On her way out, she delivered her exit line to no one and all of us, the receipt for a decade, the family motto coming home. I didn't sign up to be somebody's nurse. I laughed. I couldn't help it. One short, ugly sound that I disguised as a cough, because 10 years later, standing in a hallway he could no longer walk out of, my father got to hear it from the other side of the staircase. Maria filed a report with Adult Protective Services that afternoon. Suspected attempted financial exploitation of a dependent adult. It took her 40 minutes and she typed the whole time like the keyboard owed her money. You okay? She asked me when she finished. She knew by then. Dana, Maria, HR, a small circle, all of it documented. I keep waiting to enjoy this, I said, and it keeps not arriving. She nodded like a woman with 12 years of watching karma work. It never lands where you think it will, she said. Give it time. Over the next week, Maria's phone calls assembled the rest of the picture. The way social workers quietly assemble the pictures, families spend fortunes hiding. The joint checking account had been drained to $1,111 the week of the stroke. Hale Strategic Consulting, LLC, had been functionally insolvent for 2 years. One anchor client had left in 2024 and taken the revenue with it. The Carmel Ridge condo with the rooftop pool carried a first mortgage and a home equity line against it. The Range Rover had a loan balance north of its value. Our private pay rate is $11,400 a month. His liquid assets would cover about 90 days. After that, Medicaid pending, spend down rules, and a county caseworker. And the detail I have turned over in my hands 100 times since. The divorce petition was stamped by the court clerk at 8:42 a.m. The ER intake showed she dropped him at the entrance at 7:15. She beat the courthouse doors. She left him at a hospital and made it to the filing window before most people have finished their coffee. I thought about my mother sitting up against a headboard in a pale blue scarf saying, all right, 15 years, 2 children, 1 diagnosis, and he turned left at the stop sign. 8 years, no children, 1 stroke, and Brittany didn't even park the car. He built his whole life on the principle that you leave the moment someone becomes work. He just never planned on being the work. Here is the part nobody warns you about. Paperwork does not care about poetry. My father had no durable power of attorney, no advance directive, no healthcare proxy. The spouse who would normally speak for him was an adverse party in an active divorce whose attorney answered every call with, my client is unavailable. Unavailable turned out to mean Cabo. So the county did what counties do. The Office of the Public Guardian petitioned the probate court for guardianship of his person and conservatorship of what was left of his estate. And state law, in its blunt wisdom, requires that notice of such a petition be served on the respondent's adult children, which meant a process server was going to find Jason at his dorm and my mother at her little rented house with the garden, holding an envelope with the name Richard Hale in it, unless I got there first. I called Jason on a Thursday night. He's 18 now, a freshman at state, and he took it standing up. I could hear him stop pacing when the name landed. Let the county have him, he said. His voice didn't shake. That was somehow worse. You don't owe him a bedpan, Claire. Don't let him make you 14 again. He's not making me anything, I said. He's a resident on my unit. Yeah, Jason said quietly. And Mom was a wife in his house. He wasn't wrong, and I didn't sleep much that night. I told Mom that Saturday, in her garden, because some news should only be delivered somewhere alive. She's 5 years cancer-free now. Her hair came back silver and she refuses to dye it. She says she earned every strand. She was splitting a root-bound rosemary plant when I said his name for the first time in probably 6 years, and her hands never stopped working working the soil. I told her all of it. The stroke, the paralysis, Brittany at the ER entrance, room 304, my unit. She was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, all right, the same word, the exact same word, 10 years later, in the exact same tone, level, unarmored, unbeaten. I used to think that word was surrender. I understand now that it was the sound of a woman refusing to hand any more of herself over. She turned the rosemary out of its pot and teased the roots loose, and after a while she asked her only question, is he in pain? No, I said, not physical pain. She nodded and planted the rosemary. Okay then, that was all. I drove home telling myself the hard part was over. Everyone knew. The guardianship would process. The story had gone stable, like a patient after a rough night. I'm a nurse. I know better than to say a night is over before it's over. Day 16, 2:47 a.m. My phone lit up on the nightstand with the facility's number, and I was upright before the second ring, because a charge nurse's body answers before her brain does. It was our night nurse. Room 304, aspiration event during the overnight. Oxygen saturation, 81%, temperature 103.1, rigors, the works. They'd already called 911. He was on his way back to St. Vincent's at 3:12 a.m. My phone rang again, and this time it was the emergency department. Dr. Osei, attending physician, calm, tired, kind, the 3 a.m. voice of a person who delivers hard sentences for a living. Aspiration pneumonia, early sepsis picture. He might need to be intubated if the oxygen kept sliding. We're having trouble establishing who can consent, Dr. Osei said. His spouse's attorney says she's unavailable. There's no directive on file, no guardian appointed yet. The hearing's still 11 days out. The county says next in the hierarchy is adult children. A pause, a page flip. The facility's paperwork lists you as a contact. Are you his daughter? There are questions you spend 10 years not answering, and then a stranger asks you one at 3:12 in the morning, and you find out what's actually in you. Yes, I said. I'm his daughter. Then I need to ask you some questions about how aggressive he'd want us to be. I stood in my kitchen in socks and a t-shirt, holding the phone, staring at my reflection in the dark window. I'm a nurse. I know exactly what these words mean at 3 a.m. Full treatment, escalation, the tube, or the softer road. Comfort focused. Let the pneumonia be, as they used to say, the old man's friend. The math was right there, doing itself, in a voice that sounded a little like a suitcase clasp. He wouldn't do this for you. He didn't do this for her. Nobody on earth would blame you. My hands were shaking. Not my voice. Never my voice. Give me 10 minutes, I said. There are 3 of us. I called Jason. Voicemail. Then he picked up on the second try. Sleep wrecked. I laid it out in 4 sentences. Do whatever. I don't. He stopped. I heard him breathe. No, wait. A long silence. 18 years old at 3 a.m. holding a decision grown men run from. What would we want a stranger to do? If he was just some guy? Everything indicated, I said. That's the standard for some guy. Then that, Jason said. He doesn't get to make us into something else. Then I called Mom. She answered on the second ring, like she'd been waiting 10 years for a 3 a.m. phone call and was relieved it was finally here. I asked her what I should tell them. The line was quiet long enough that I could hear her kitchen clock. We're not him, she said. 4 syllables. A whole verdict. A whole family constitution. Ratified at 3 in the morning. I called Dr. Osei back at 3:31. Treat him, I said. Everything indicated. He's full code until a court says otherwise. Understood, he said. And then gently, in the way ER doctors sometimes step over the line to be human. For what it's worth, most people in your file's situation don't call back. We're not most people, I said. Not because of him. In spite of him. He never needed the tube. High flow oxygen. 2 IV antibiotics. 6 days upstairs at St. Vincent's. He came back to room 304 15 pounds lighter, with a feeding tube placed and a new stack of consent forms. And when the transport crew wheeled him past my station, he looked at me the entire length of the hall. He knew. By then, he knew everything. Who I was. Who had answered the phone. What we'd said yes to, and what we could have said instead. I signed the readmission paperwork and went back to my rounds. The guardianship hearing was on a Wednesday morning. Department 7 probate court. I went on my day off and sat in the back row in regular clothes, which felt like a costume. Judge Carol Maddox, 19 years on the probate bench, ran her courtroom like a well-staffed unit. No wasted motion, no tolerance for theater. The county's court investigator had filed her report, and the relevant portions were read into the record in the flat, neutral language of the state, which turned out to be the most devastating dialect I have ever heard. Respondent has 2 adult children, with whom he has had no contact since 2016, following his departure from the family home during his then-wife's cancer treatment. Records reflect no financial support beyond garnished obligations, which ceased. The family home was subsequently lost to foreclosure. Respondent's current spouse filed for dissolution of marriage on the date of his hospitalization, has not visited, and through counsel has declined any caregiving role. The truth didn't explode. That's for movies. The truth was entered into evidence, which is better, because explosions can be argued with and records cannot. Every person in that courtroom, the clerk, the bailiff, 2 law students in the second row, heard the state of California summarize my father's character in 90 seconds of bureaucratic prose, and nobody so much as raised an eyebrow in his defense, because there was no one there to raise one. Brittany didn't appear. Her attorney did, long enough to ask the court to release certain jointly held assets, so the dissolution could proceed efficiently. Judge Maddox looked at him over her glasses for a moment. I will treasure into old age. Transfers frozen pending the conservatorship accounting. The APS report referred for review. Petition granted. Patricia Wu, Deputy Public Guardian, County Office of the Public public guardian, 9 years in the role, appointed guardian of the person and conservator of the estate of Richard Hale. Patricia Wu turned out to be exactly who you'd want and exactly who my father would once have looked through. Practical, unsentimental, carrying a county-issued laptop bag held together at one corner with packing tape. Within a month, she had untangled what was left. The settlement, when the divorce finalized that fall, gave Brittany what she'd fought for. The condo with its mortgage and its home equity line, and the Range Rover with its loan. She kept the assets. The assets turned out to be debts with nice finishes. I'm told the condo went on the market in September and came back off it in November. His Medicaid was approved after the spend down. He is, in the language of the state, a long-term custodial resident, county guarded, publicly funded, room and board and care provided by strangers. Well, almost strangers. Nobody from his old life ever called. Not one client, not one vineyard wedding groomsman, not one rooftop pool friend. His LinkedIn still says growth architect. The Rolex sits in a labeled bin in the belongings room. Inventory item 1 of 1, ticking for no one. He wanted a partner, not a patient. He ended up a patient with no partner. And it took no revenge, no confrontation, no dramatic speech in a hallway. It took a decade, a blood vessel, and the precise operation of the systems he thought were beneath him. Intake forms, court investigators, county files, each one recording in its patient institutional handwriting exactly who he was. Maria was right. It never lands where you think it will. It lands everywhere. In April, my mother came to Riverview Terrace. She didn't ask my permission, and she didn't ask for support. She asked for the room number. She drove herself in the Corolla she bought at auction the year we lost the house and has kept running out of spite ever since. And she walked in wearing a yellow cardigan with her silver hair down, and every head at my nurse's station turned. Because my mother at 61, alive, is not a woman you fail to notice. Wait here, she told me gently, at the door of 304. This part's mine. She was in there 4 minutes. She never sat down. Through the doorway, I could see her standing at the foot of his bed, hands folded, exactly the way she'd sat against that headboard 10 years ago, braced, level, unbeaten. Except this time, she was the one standing, and he was the one under the blankets. I couldn't hear most of it, and I've decided not to ask. In the parking lot afterward, she told me the only part she wanted me to have. I told him I made it, she said, and that you kids made it. He should know exactly what he missed. Then she squeezed my hand, the same squeeze, the bus ride squeeze, currency of our whole life, got into the Corolla and drove home to her garden. Priya told me later that he cried for a long time that afternoon, the working half of his face doing the work of the whole thing. My mother has never been back. She doesn't need to be. Remission, it turns out, is not only a medical status. He does his therapies now. That started, not coincidentally, the week after her visit. Speech twice a week, where he has clawed back perhaps a dozen reliable words. Occupational therapy, where a very patient young man is teaching a right-handed man to write with his left. One afternoon in June, Priya waved me into the room. He'd asked for the whiteboard, pointed to it until she understood. It had taken him, she said, most of 10 minutes. On the board, in block letters that staggered like a first grader's, like each one had been carried upstairs. Sorry. He watched me read it. Then his left hand went back to work, laboring under it, letter by letter, while the monitor ticked and neither of us breathed. Good nurse. I stood there for a while with those 2 shaky lines, 10 years and 1 staircase between them. I know, I said. I let him decide which one I meant. Then I checked his positioning, refilled his water, thickened, aspiration precautions, and moved on to 303, because 303 needed me too, and that is the whole point of me. I didn't say, I forgive you. I don't chart things that aren't true. Maybe someday it will be true. And on that day, believe me, I document everything. It's been 7 months since Maria dropped that file on my desk. Jason came once at Christmas, stood in the doorway of room 304 for 10 minutes, coat on, and left. Whatever was said or wasn't is between the two of them, and I let it stay there. He's back at school. Dean's List. He calls Mom every Sunday, which is a thing our father never taught him, which may be exactly why he does it. Mom's garden took a ribbon at the county fair for her roses. She laughed for a full minute when they handed it to her. I have the photo on my fridge, under a magnet, above the spot where a jar labeled quarters and emergencies once lived. And my father is a permanent resident of B Wing, room 304, Riverview Terrace, the facility for the patients nobody else wants, staffed by the kind of people who stay. Patricia Wu visits quarterly with her taped-up laptop bag. The county pays his bill. The aides he once rang and dismissed turn him every 2 hours so his skin stays whole. And every shift I work, I check his room on my rounds. Last on the hall, like every other room, no more and no less. That's the discipline. That's the vow. He gets exactly what every human being in my building gets, which is more than he ever gave anyone. 10 years ago, my father stood at the bottom of a staircase and screamed the only fully honest sentence I ever heard him say. I am not a nurse. He was right. He isn't one. He never could have been. Nursing is just staying, practiced until it becomes a skill. And he never once stayed anywhere it was hard to stand. But his daughter stayed, through the bucket at 2 a.m., through the foreclosure, through the rattling apartment above the wash and go, through nursing school, all the way to the head of a unit that takes the people nobody else wants. He wanted a partner, not a patient. Life made him a patient anyway. And the only reason he isn't facing that alone is the nurse he swore he'd never be.